What I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be explaining to you a bit about chilies and tomatoes. I'm not sure whether a lot of you actually do grow them in the ground or you grow them in bags or how things work out, but I'm going to go over both methods anyway. Sorry?
Just turning you up.
Oh, turning up, okay. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, good. So basically what I'm going to do first off is I'm going to start, we're going to have a bit of a question and answer time, sorry Nick, but I do have to know what people want. So can I just ask a question? How many people have had problems with chilies in the past, or tomatoes? Quite a few. How many of you people grow them in the open ground? How many people grow them in bags of potting mixes? Okay, so there's a real smattering of everything there. I just want to say that there's two ways of growing capsicums, peppers and tomatoes, because to tell you the truth, the pepper, tomato and the eggplant are all members of the Solanaceae family. So they come from tropical or north of South America, like Peru, the Andes, around there. And because of that, we've got to give them all the conditions that they absolutely need in Christchurch to be able to grow. If we put them in too colder conditions with not enough food, they're not going to perform very well. Now, one of the biggest complaints that I have from most customers is when I go around to their gardens, I've planted them in compost without any food with that. Compost is really a soil conditioner. It's not really a proper media for growing tomatoes that are really gross feeders and also peppers in. I'm going to say a few things about that. Hopefully you can see this all right, but the thing is, if you are growing in open ground, that's fine. How many people just use compost to grow peppers or cucumbers? Or capsicums? So you do use proper soil, or you just put it in your soilless medium? Soil media. Okay. Right. What I'm going to say is this: if you are putting these sort of crops in a soil-based media, you need to have the proper food. You need to have the proper pH to grow them in. Now, all plants require nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. These are all macronutrients. These are supplied in great numbers to the plant. Now, how many of us know what's in our soil? I don't. So unless we do a soil test, we're not really sure. Also, with the soils, we need micronutrients, or TEs, trace elements, and these are used in small amounts, which help the uptake of the major nutrients through the plant. So both are really, really important. And on top of that, we've got our soil pH. Now I'm going to talk a wee bit about Total Replenish, because Total Replenish is one of the products that's used extensively in the nursery. That is my own recipe, and we use it in all our soil mixes that grow all our crops. This has got Total Replenish in it. All our houseplants have Total Replenish in them. All our veggies, trees and shrubs, the whole lot, it's all Total Replenish. And that's what drives our mixes. Now, Total Replenish basically is a controlled release fertiliser that releases to the plant. It imbibes water, which I'll talk about in a minute, and it releases back to the plant with trace elements and everything that the plant needs to survive. So basically your nitrogen produces lush green growth. Phosphorus is very good for root development. Potassium is exceptionally good for bud initiation, flower initiation and so on. Other important parts that we use is calcium. Calcium is one of these products which you actually use to strengthen the cell walls of the plant, and also helps out taper the macronutrients through the plant. Your trace elements, all here are the major ones. There are others that the plant takes up as well. But if you're growing polanthus and stuff like that, they're very, very high levels of iron. So I'm telling you this, if you're going to be growing your plants in the ground, in the open ground, this is what you need to know. So this is our controlled release fertiliser. This is Nutricoat, which we use in our Total Replenish. That's the original size of the pellet, and it's incorporated. When it's incorporated in the soil, what happens is that imbibes water, and it swells to twice its normal size. And then after that, what happens is it releases the fertiliser with the NPK, the trace elements, back through the soil to the plant. As well as that is your main source of food. Our quick release food is Tribon, which we put in as well. This is a quick release water soluble fertiliser. The bigger parts start releasing, and the smaller parts do, but the smaller parts release first, which gives an instant feed to your plants, and the bigger parts release over a 4-month period. So it's releasing food to your plants all the time. You can actually notice a result with that within about 3 weeks. That is total replenish there. It's sold in that little pot. Just going to say, I did have some sachets here to pass around. Oh, here they are. So basically that's what the product is. The grey stuff is a slow release fertiliser, just pass it around. And the grey stuff, the light grey stuff is a quick release fertiliser. Now if you don't know what's in your soil, the best thing to do is to put that on, and if you put it on, it's around about 1 handful per square metre when you're planting. It has to be incorporated in the soil. As well as that, we talk about pH. I'll take that off. pH is very, very important to plants, and especially vegetables and blueberries and so on, because a lot of people come to me and say, my blueberry hasn't grown very well, or other plants haven't grown very well. Your pH is your probable hydrogen, which is your alkalinity or acidity of your soil. Now, if your soil is too alkaline for acid-loving plants or vice versa, that plant cannot absorb the nutrients out of there. So it doesn't matter how much food you have there, they're not going to be able to absorb it. So, as a rule, your vegetables, can you all see that okay? Sorry, it's moving a wee bit. As a rule, your veggies actually like around about 6.2 to 6.8. Our water in Christchurch, beautiful that is, with a bit of chlorine and everything in it, is actually 7. So when you put a fertiliser on, like Total Replenish or any other fertiliser, what will happen, that will draw your pH down. So that's why I always say to everybody, when you're planting vegetables, always plant them with a bit of lime, because that's very, very important. So there's your acid-loving plant range there, such as your azaleas, camellias and so on, but your veggies like it up here high. Okay. So if you are planting in the open ground, make sure you put some lime on when you plant your vegetables, and also use a bit of Total Replenish or a plant food that's got NPK and trace elements in it. It's very, very important. Right. That's if you're planting in the ground. If you want to look at a bit more scientific, what I do in my place, because I haven't got much room, is I plant into bags. And with the bags, I do it 2 ways. I actually use shrub and tub. Hope I don't go through the stage here. Shrub and tub is a powerhouse of Total Replenish. It's pH adjusted mix. It's got everything it needs to grow. And so what we do with that is when I come to plant my plants, I take this across the top here like that. Oh, I'm not wearing a mask because, thanks for that. This mix is mixed very fresh, and as a result, it's nice and moist. The problem that you have mostly with soils is when you buy soilless media, such as this, you have to make sure you use it fresh. A lot of the problems occur when you use half a bag, a quarter bag, stick it in your garage for a period of time. Then what happens is that is heating up and it's releasing fertiliser all the time, and as a result it gets warmer, and it's an ideal environment for Legionnaires' disease and other bacterium to live. And the next time you come to lift it up and you open up and it puffs up, and that's where the problem starts. All our mixes have got a bag, they've got a date on them, and they've got to be used within 6 weeks once they're bagged in our own stores. So basically what you do is, actually I'll put it over here so you can see better. I thump that down like that, and because, I'm going to go over a bit this later on, because tomatoes are great food lovers and water lovers, I make a hole about 2 inches or 50 mils up, like that, and that is your drainage. And because they're such great water lovers, when you water that, there'll be water sitting down the bottom here of your tomato. And as the tomato roots go down, it acts like a blocker, and it takes up that water that's in the bag. I also put this down. It's actually probably a good idea if you are immunity compromised to wear a mask anyway. Well, this is how I do mine anyway. So basically what happens is I make that a reservoir as well. So when I come to water these, and I always water my tomatoes in the morning, I fill that up with water right up to the top, then it drains right the way through. And it drains, and there's also a reservoir at the bottom here, which the plant will absorb later on if it needs to. So that's a good water source for that.
Do that daily?
No, I probably do it about every 3 days at the time when it's really, really high. Depends on what your weather's doing. When you plant something like a tomato, you should always plant it full sun, always full sun. I went to see somebody one time who had their tomatoes growing in the garage. And of course there was no light, they're all spindly, and they said, I'm never going to buy tomatoes from Odering again. They never ever grow at all. No wonder. Tomatoes like to be planted facing full north, so they get the early morning sun, the lunchtime sun, and the evening sun. And what's more, when I plant one against my house, I actually plant them in a way that if it's a southwest change and it hails, it's protected from the southwest. That's where most of your hail comes from. So basically, that's what I do there. When I'm planting my plant, I grab a tomato. This one here is called Arrowtown. Now what I'm just going to talk about is Arrowtown is a yellow one, an orange one. And the difference between the orange tomato and a red one, can anybody tell me about the nutrients? Lycopene, correct. What happens is an orange tomato, when you eat it raw, you're taking that antioxidant, that lycopene. Whereas a red tomato has to be cooked before it's absorbed through the body. So these ones here, the Arrowtown is really, the orange ones are really quite sweet, and they're probably better for you. This one's called Arrowtown, as I say, and I've got a lot of them, so to buy some. That'd be great. Right, and I'll take that out like so. Now look at the roots on that already. They grow so fast at this time of year. And once I take that off, that is a good little specimen.
How old is the plant?
Oh, probably about some time. Actually, that's good. That's a good point. Probably 2 months, 6 weeks, 2 months. Yeah.
Excuse me. If somebody asks a question, can you repeat the question? Because we can't hear the question.
Oh, sorry. Good point. The lady down here just wanted to know how old that was, and I'm just saying it's probably about 6 weeks to 8 weeks old. So they grow really, really fast. Now, when you look at a tomato, you look at the graft on here. Actually, I'll plant it first anyway. When you plant that, basically your graft is right here. And I'll show you how we do our grafting in a minute, but basically when you plant that, that needs to be just below the soil, so the graft is not in the soil. If it does, what will happen, natural roots will come from here and try and grow into the soil, then it will take the goodness out of the plant. So when you're planting it, make a hole, nice deep hole, plant it like so. Straight up and down. Just want to get rid of this anyway. Now, when I plant it, I place it against the side of my house like so, and I'll show you over here what I do with it after that. Then I basically just put a brick against it, because as it grows up, it turns into a bit of a sail, and it can fall over if you're not careful. So put a brick against it. But that's all you need to do with that. All tomatoes, and especially grafted tomatoes, need at least 25 litres of good virgin soil to be able to grow. That is really, really important. So one of our biggest complaints with grafted tomatoes is when people plant them, sometimes there's a sucker that comes from the rootstock. And this is a rootstock here, and the rootstock, what happens is the sucker comes up, and because the rootstock is actually a very vigorous, weedy tomato, it will actually take over the whole plant, and it will kill that plant later on. So if you see anything coming from below the rootstock or around there, you must remove that, because that will actually kill off the plant eventually. Right, when we do our grafting with our rootstocks, what we do is we have a rootstock here, which is, as I say, is a very vigorous weedy tomato. It has very, very small fruit, so if you notice that and say that's a complaint that you have that they didn't do very well, it's because that might have come from there and taken over the plant. But what happens is we get our rootstock and we cut a 45-degree angle. Can you see that okay or not? I don't suppose you can. We cut a 45-degree cut in there, and we get we put our sign, which is either a moneymaker, a potentate, a sweet treats, Arrowtown, Rome, or whatever, and we make a 45-degree cut on the rootstock as well, and we stick that on there, and then we put a little plastic tag around there, so it joins it together. Then at the same time, we cut off the bottom of the rootstock, and we then put it in a propagation tent at 22 degrees and 98% humidity in soil, and it grows a whole new root system within 10 days, and this all heals. Then we take these clips off and it's good to go. So that's how we do it, and that way we get 99% of all the sap flow from the rootstock going straight through into the sign, which means you get a much better yield. Now why grow a grafted tomato? The reason why you do it is because you get about 3 times the yield if you look after them properly. So the good thing about the rootstock type plants too is that you can plant these several years in the same place and you don't get a build up of any diseases or anything. And also it's a disease-free resistant, so restraint. So you shouldn't get any mildews, verticillium wilts or anything like that, as well as the yield. So they've actually made quite a good name for themselves, grafted tomatoes. As your grafted tomato grows, or the tomato grows, in my place, it's even facing the same way. Right, this one here was one that I planted ages ago, I think, and I lost it, but it surfaced again. So what I do is, on my gutter above my house, I've put a wee board with these little staples in there, and I have these strings coming down, and I grind up those. Avoid growing it if you can on bamboos, because your bamboos, as it grows, and it gets really big and heavy, it'll slide down here. Oh, sorry. It'll slide down here, and it will break. And so if you can, try and secure it properly like that. You can use a trellis if you wish, or netting to hold it up if you want to as well. I don't know which one that is. But after by December, the roots will be right down the bottom of your tomato bag, and it'll be taking up all the nutrients that it needs. And then by that time, you'll probably see some of these bottom leaves starting to go yellow. That's your indicator that you need to start feeding on your tomato when the bottom leaves start going yellow, because what will happen is the tomato will rob the nutrients from the bottom of the plant to support the top of the plant. So as they grow, basically the pests and diseases you have to worry about the most are aphids, whitefly, psyllid. You all heard of psyllids? Psyllids are one of those horrible new things that came from Australia, probably about 5 years ago, or might be about 10 years ago now. And what happens is they basically get onto the leaves of the plant, and 1 in every 10,000, I think, has a bacterium. And that bacterium can kill off your tomato or make it taste really bad. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, okay, sure. Oh, sure, because I'm not sure how much everybody knows here. So, while we're talking about that, I've already got now, so I'm just trying to sort of yeah. Okay, well basically that's why I do mine this way, because I went through trial and error that you're best to use a very soft sort of tie like this, and you just make a very loose knot at the bottom here, and if you need to, don't strangle that tomato, otherwise it'll stop taking nutrients and food up. But you just make a very light, loose knot like that. Then I actually use twists and ties, like this, and when I do this, I actually, when I'm putting the twist and tie on, I actually hold a bit of a loop at top and I twist it around like that. And I do it probably every 200, 300, probably, on the height of the tomato. And the reason why you leave that loop there is as that lateral grows, it's going to expand and get bigger and bigger. So if you choke it off, it won't be able to do that still. So as it grows, basically let them do the thing. Now off this one here, say if I was to say this is here as a lateral, as it grows up I leave the main one on here. The main one actually broke off on us unfortunately, but I leave the main one on to grow up to the top. I take at least 5, 6 on a grafted tomato of the laterals here, and I let the strongest ones, I let them grow up. The weak ones I take off, but you want at least the strongest 6 or 7 of them coming up. Now off these laterals, so say that was lateral there, then you'd take the laterals off these leaders here. So basically what you do is you take off this one, that one, but leave your fruits of course, otherwise you lose it. And the more laterals that you can probably have with these, the better. The good thing about grafted tomatoes is they're a powerhouse of growing, so they will just keep on setting up laterals. If you've got too many laterals, what will happen though is your tomato will not be able to ripen up later on with the fruit, so you have to take some of the laterals off. If you just have one big stem going right to the top, you're going to have to get a ladder to pick them. So the idea is to have at least well, I usually have about 6 or 7 laterals going there. But the more you spread them out, the better. Because later on you're going to want as much light as you can to get down to ripen the fruit. So another thing that I do is as these are growing, I often cut these off by half. And that way it allows more light to get into the centre of the tomato as they're growing. Pests and diseases, does that answer your question pretty much there? Yeah. The important thing with the grafted tomatoes, don't leave it to its own devices. They grow really fast. They need tying, especially all the time. Sometimes I come home from work and say, oh gosh, I've got to do the tomatoes again. But you have to do them. Otherwise, if you let them grow too big, they'll get so big without being tied, then they'll fall over and you'll lose that whole lateral. So as I said before, take these laterals out on these ones that you have and just allow the fruits to come through and do their thing. Pests and diseases, beetle bug, really good. This is a naturally based garlic chili pyrethrin spray. It's got a 1 day withholding period. This one I got last night had white fly, so go a bit of a spray and there's nothing left alive on there this morning, which is really good. So it does work. Other problems that you can have with tomatoes is they are susceptible sometimes to diseases such as early blight, which is Alternaria, Solani, and also late blight, which is Phytophthora. And so the best thing to use for that is copper. And copper, liquid copper, is really good for everything, because liquid copper is actually cheap, it's safe to use, and it's also a fungicide and a bactericide. So it will treat everything you need to have on these, and also the peppers. As I said before, peppers and tomatoes are of the same family, and they like the same sort of food ratios and the same sort of conditions. Yeah, fine. Oh, we're making a really good time here. Well, what else do I need to speak? Yes.
What about propagating seeds? Seed tomatoes.
Oh, good point. Good point. When you're doing your seeds, actually I should go and ask that face here, but basically when you're doing your seeds, when you sow your seeds, you need to sow them probably around about August, even before that if you've got a glass house, because from up until around about early September they're probably glass house grown, and then after that you can put them outside around about this time. But with your tomatoes, basically you get them like so. You just this one here is big beef, and you scatter sow them in a tray of Odering seed raising mix, because it's very, very good stuff, I believe. And then you cover it with twice the thickness of the seed. You make sure it's nice and moist. Then you grow them about 22 degrees centigrade, and it takes about a week for them to germinate. And then after that, then you harden them off a wee bit, and always in light, never in too dark a place. Otherwise, they'll just grow very spindly and weak. Then after that, you prick them out into like a small pot, and then you can prick them out into a bigger container later on. But the seed raising mix, Odering seed raising mix is what we use for our own stuff, so it's good stuff. With tomatoes and peppers, you need to start early though. I would have had them all sown by now. Probably, yeah, well, we started ours around about end of May, beginning of June, and we've just cut out now. So, because traditionally in Christchurch, the traditional time for planting is around about Labour weekend to show weekend, and the reason for that is we always seem to get a cold change just before Labour weekend. No matter what you think, it's always the same. So most gardeners actually plant around about that time. What else do I need to mention here? Are there any quick questions? I forgot something. Yeah.
Just wondering why you're using the shrub and tub mix rather than the fruit and veggie mix.
Good point. Good point. This lady just wants to know why I'm using the shrub and tub mix instead of the fruit and veggie mix. This fruit and veggie mix has exactly the same amount of oomph as a shrub and tub does. And I've got a very small garden, so I try to keep it as compact as possible. So I'm going to show you how you do. You can use this as well, and I'll show you how you plant those as well at the same time. But I use shrub and tub because it's a power pack of food. This here takes a bit more room, and also, but it's still just as good. But it's probably got less fertiliser per litre than the shrub and tub has. It's grown more as a lot as a filler for filling up veggie beds and planting broad crops in. And yes, absolutely. Yeah, you could probably put about 3 strawberries in there.
The dried blood, what's the
nutrients on that compared to all this other stuff you've got?
Dried blood is an organic source of mostly iron, and it's very, very good for iron-loving crops such as primulas, polyanthus, that sort of thing. And but the iron that goes into this mix is given through the total replenish basically. But there is iron in there, but that's mostly used for iron-loving sort of plants. It's because it's blood, you know, high in iron. So.
What about NPK?
NPK, very light, isn't it? Nicola, you know what dried blood, the NPK dried blood is? 0, 0, 0. Which one's that? Sol or not Sol? Okay. Blood and bone. Blood and bone is different to dry blood. Blood and bone has calcium and it's got blood and it's got offal and other stuff. So when you pick up these sort of containers, they should all have what an NPK is on them, and it should say what is in it. Sometimes it's one. Oh, NPK 836 plus minerals and trace elements. But that's liquid blood and bone.
Julian, at the end of the season, tomato, or your harvest all your tomatoes, what do you do with that?
With a bag?
And the tomato?
Well, at the end of the season, I just cut the tomato off and dispose of it. And I usually just throw it because it's got little plastic ties on it, unless you want to undo the ties. No, and then I use it because I've got dogs at home and they ruin my lawn, so I use it later on for sprinkle on the lawn with a bit of seed, lawn seed, and it keeps my lawn really good.
So
Or you can use it on your potatoes.
Where do you get your graft stock from?
My grafting stock,
Yeah.
it all comes from Holland actually. It's mostly all Dutch. Enterzaden is the main seed company we deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it all comes in like that. So this here has got enough food to last it right through to December. Then if you wish to, you can liquid feed. Thrive is very, very good because you want a liquid feed that's just about close to twice as much potash as there is nitrogen, because don't think what I said before, if you put too much nitrogen onto this, it's going to put on lush growth. It's just going to get soft and lush and grow. Your phosphorus in here will help your root development and protect from disease, and your potash produces a dark green, strong plant, so it prevents it from getting too leggy and too tall.
Would you use the liquid in bags and pots rather than a replenish?
No, basically a total replenish is only right from the start. Then if you use your liquid fertiliser, the good thing about it is it's instant and it's quick release, but it dissipates faster. Your solid fertilisers will actually last a lot longer, but it's still a very good product if you want to use Thrive, which works really well. So there's phosphagen as well you could use. Thrive, there's so many products you can use, but the other product that I really recommend is Woolies Secret Tomato Food. It's got a food source in there, and it's also got neem granules which protect from whitefly, aphids, and those sorts of things. So it's exceptionally good for keeping your bugs off your plants, as well as it feeds at the same time. About 1 teaspoon every sort of 2 to 3 weeks, and it just keeps your plants growing really, really nicely. So, when we're talking about tomatoes, we've got different types. We've got our basket type. This is called Tumbling Tom. We're very late with these this year because we had trouble getting seed with COVID. We've got, and these are all determinate sizes. So they grow a certain height and they stop. This is our Red Robin. It's a patio type tomato. It grows up and it has little wee fruits on it like so. And it stays really nice if you haven't got much room, like you can leave it on your deck. Then you've got your interdeterminate types, such as this one here. This is Sweet Treats. Probably our most vigorous non-grafted tomato. And it has little cherry type fruits, about like that size.
What does determinate mean?
Oh, indeterminate or determinate?
Both.
Nicola just said what determinate means. Determinate, I think I've said, is one that will grow a certain height and stop. So an indeterminate, like your vine types, like these ones here, they grow as big or as tall or as wide as you want them to, as we've just discussed with the grafted tomato. But this one here is probably, as I say, it's very, very vigorous and most popular tomato, Sweet Treats, and again, you have to treat that a bit like a grafted tomato. Okay. Companion plant, basil. Basil's very good. People talk about marigolds as well, but I've had the best results with basil, especially in a greenhouse. Yeah. I'm not sure about parsley, but I just use basil if I'm going to do it. But that is a good point, because all these new products that we're going to be talking about shortly, with the peppers especially, are generally bee friendly, easier to use, safer to use than the old organophosphates that used to be available, such as Target and those sorts of things. So I probably should get you to talk about those, shouldn't I? You're shaking your head. Yeah. Probably plant it on the side, because that food will actually that tomato's going to use all that and want some more. Okay.
Sorry, so if you're growing it in the ground, quite far away, or?
No, if you're growing it in the ground, you can put your basil quite close to it. Yep. That's right. The good.
Can you repeat the questions, please?
Oh, sorry, I keep getting it. The lady was saying, if you're growing your tomatoes in the open ground, can you plant basil far away or very close to your plants? You can actually plant it quite close, because the good thing about soils is, soil media, is that it's got a buffer in it which protects your plant for if you've got too much fertiliser or whatever, and it protects it from, it can take a lot more water. Whereas your soil-based media, generally the water runs through it a lot faster because it's got better drainage. Whereas your soil mix in your ground is a lot more dense, and it holds more water, which means you can grow basil quite easy, because basil is actually a shade lover but a heat loving sort of plant. And also we're selling basil towers, which are very, very good. They're exceptional because that way you can pick them at the same time, and they're in a bucket already, and they stay in that bucket all summer long. But if you have a look at your magazine, they're in there. Okay, we're going for time. Right, we're going to talk about chilies now, chilies and peppers.
What about watering? Stable, water on the foliage.
Oh yes, when you water these, water them in the morning, fill that right up to the top. The gentleman was asking about watering. You fill that right up to the top with water if you're using this, and it'll flow right down. It'll keep some at the bottom, and the rest of it will just flow out the bottom.
But you don't water your foliage.
No, don't water your foliage, no. If you water your foliage, you're more likely, especially with Christchurch conditions, because we haven't got a short window, you could get some disease coming in there. So always water underneath, fill that right to the top, and let it drain right the way through. Watering is very, very important for tomatoes. Water, food, sun. Tomatoes need all that, and if they don't get it, you won't get a good crop. Okay, I'm just trying to think if there's anything I've forgotten about tomatoes. It's probably bound to be things I've forgotten. But tomatoes, if you do it this way, it's scientific, you're more likely to have success. Because I don't know what you've got in your soil, whether you've had pesticides in there before, but the rules are don't grow in a compost unless you know what's in it. Because some of the compost that you buy, and some of the compost, even in our own gardens back in the days, we used to spray it with woody weed killers to kill the broadleafs in the plant, in the lawn. And if you use those clippings, you can also get that weed killer coming, because it can last quite a long time. Now the thing is with that, if your tomato gets a sniff of Roundup or anything like that, what will happen is these leaves will start curling over, and you won't get a crop out of them. One time I very carefully did some weed killing, and I must have got a wee bit over them, and they certainly had it. I had a gentleman who said, your tomatoes are crap, and I went to see him, and he'd used pea straw, and the pea straw had been weed killed, and he'd used the pea straw at the top of his plants as a mulch. And what had happened is that it leached through into the ground, and also disfigured his tomatoes to the extent that he never got a crop out of it. So watch out for weed killers, especially. They will not deal well with weed killers, especially Roundup and those hormone type weed killers. Right, we can talk about questions a bit later on. Eggplants, hard to grow. Capsicums can be hard to grow, tomatoes can be hard to grow. All the same family. Keep remembering that. Tropical loving plants. Lots of food, lots of virgin potting mix, water, heat, light, sun. And the thing is that they've been used for hundreds of years, capsicums, and for the last 45 years they've been used extensively in Christchurch. This one here is your bell type or your blocky type, and they are commonly used in salads. And the other type that's used extensively is your chilies, such as this thing here. They all have a Scoville rating. This here has a Scoville rating of 0. And do you know what Scoville ratings are? Some of you might and some of you might not, so I'll tell you. Scoville rating was discovered early last century. And what it does is it actually tells you how much of the burning sensation you can taste in so many parts per water. So if you've got a can of jalapeno, say a 500 gram can of jalapeno, and you shove that into that can, because jalapeno has a scale rating of 4,000, you need 4,000 parts of that same of sugared water or a crappy beer, like lime brown or so white. So you can only just taste that peppery taste. Now some of the capsicums are very so strong they can burn your mouth or burn your stomach. And if you ever do eat some of those, the best thing to neutralise that is milk, because that is the best thing for you. I had some school kids once around and they sort of said, "Oh no, I'll try one of these." It was a bird's eye and it was really hot. And he got it, he turned red, and then he was running off to the smoker and so I had to look after him. I felt bad about it, but the thing is that the hottest part of a capsicum or of a chili is the seeds and the placenta that goes around the seeds that holds it. So if you're making a sauce, you want a hot sauce, leave all that stuff in. If you want it less hotter, you take those seeds and the placenta piece out of it. A great source of vitamin C. More vitamin C in that than there is in kiwi fruit. So the thing is that that's why they use it extensively in salads. Good for boosting your immunity. So yeah, well that's my wife makes a really good sauce for that stuff too. With that Scoville rating, even though we talk about a Scoville rating, that's what can happen with that is if it's climate, more water can actually make them less hotter. Less water makes them more hotter. The seeds we've just discussed as well. So there is a bit to do with that climate and physiological differences. When you're planting a capsicum or a chili, really important, if you get one like this, which is your lunchbox red, every pepper has a crown fruit. This is the one here. And your crown fruit is in the first crook of the leaves. And you must take that one there out, because what happens is that plant will put all the energy into that one crown fruit. And if that does that, you're going to get a real big fruit here, and these ones you aren't going to ripen as well. So I'll just pass that round. You can see the crown fruit in there. See it one there? I was going to paint it black, but yeah, it's one right in the first crook. So take those out. Just remember when you're planting, if you want a capsicum to grow, the blocky ones require less heat than the really hot ones. This one here is called Carolina Reaper. Very hot. So we'll just go to some of those actually and just talk about that. Here's your Scoville heat rating. Carolina Reaper is 1,400,000. So for one can of fruits of Carolina Reaper, a beer can, you need 1,400,000 bits of cans of crappy beer, so you can't taste it. Okay? Yeah, that's how it works. So basically you've got your blocky types, which have a 0 Scoville rating, to your jalapeno, which is around about 4,000, which we said before. Your hot red is 30,000 to 50,000. Scotch bonnet, yellow and red, is 100,000 to 350,000. Red habanero, and so it goes up the scale to Carolina Reaper, because that's the hottest one. Even when you're dealing with Carolina Reaper, when you're going to cook it, you need to make sure you wash your hands afterwards. Don't get it in your eyes, because it can sting, really burn. So I'm just giving this warning. Who likes really hot ones? Oh, you do? Okay, we've got some out there for you anyway. If I was doing a pepper, don't forget we actually grow them in 6 packs, such as this, and pots and small pots. Can't emphasise enough to you, if you're doing Carolina Reaper or the really hot ones, you have to have a lot more heat and a really good mix for that. Right, so, where's my scissors gone? I'm going to show you how you can do these. If you don't want to grow it, you can grow it, a pepper in this way, do it the same way as a tomato in a shrub tub. You can use a potting mix, or you can use a fruit and veggie bag, or you can use a pot. If you're growing in a pot, you want at least that much, which is about 10 to 15 litres to grow in. Like I said, those roots will go down, and also they want the food, and also if you're going away on holiday, whatever, you need enough of a reservoir of water. Because if the biggest thing that kills these sort of things in tomatoes is not being watered enough. They need lots of water, especially coming into holidays when you've got the hot temperatures and so on. So, I'll show you how to do it on this one here. So this is a fruit and veggie bag. I'll do the pepper in here. Make it with your scissors or a knife. Oops, probably too high. Make a hole again, probably about an inch or 30 mils off the bottom. Go right round. Right, so, and on these ones, fruit and veggie bags, you put strawberries in, you can put rhubarb in, you can put anything in here. It's a good source of food, and it's a good source of water. Water really well. I'll put one in the middle here. Make a wee hole like that, incision. Make this one here. Carolina Reaper, I'll take this one home actually. Even when it's like that, there is still some some toxin comes off the leaf. So when you finish it, wash your hands. Got your Carolina Reaper. Actually, I hate the Carolina Reaper. I shouldn't use this one. Too hot for me. Make a hole in your bag like so. Put in gently, and just remember, all plants like to be planted halfway up the stem, halfway between the first cotyledon and the root system. That's where they all like to be planted. So don't plant them too deep, don't plant past the first side of the leaves, and don't plant them so the roots are exposed. When the roots are exposed to a plant, it's like us being in the winter time all the time, we take off our shirt and we go into the sun. What happens to us? We burn. It's the same with all roots of plants. So you really want that plant to be planted nice and firmly, halfway up the stem between the roots and the first cotyledon.
If your roots become a bit exposed with watering, can you
top up? The gentleman was asking if your roots become exposed, you can top up. Now, if you look at this plant here, you can see the roots are exposed already on this, because what happens is with the soilless media, it does pack down a wee bit. So if the roots are exposed, you can put a wee more topsoil on top. In the case of this, I'll just use a bit of this. As I said, if you get buying potting mix, use it all up. You can use it on veggie gardens, you can use it on houseplants, citrus, anything. As I said, that total replenisher in this mix is good for everything. All those things we've just mentioned. And then what I've done here is I've just got I was trying to find a Coke bottle because it's got a smaller spout, but this one here is the same sort of thing. And I just put a stake in there like so, and that just holds it. And it's a good source of water, and that way you can just fill that up, and it'll water around the bag, and that way, because as that tomato grows, pepper grows, it'll spread out and probably take up a lot more room, and it'll need a lot more water. So what that does is that's a good chance for it to fill that up, and it just waters around the bag.
So you're saying that if you plant pepper, that depth of soil,
Beg your pardon, sorry, mate? You what?
say that depth of
Yes.
bag, so that depth is enough to
Yes,
plant,
absolutely. That's absolutely enough.
they're pretty shallow plants.
Yes, yeah, like that. Oh yeah, no, what'll happen is those roots will spread out within this bag here, and that's easy enough. Like I said, for a pepper, you need about 10 to 15 litres. This is about 40 litres. Yes, sir.
Last year, by the end of the season, we filled up like a 45 litre pot with roots. Are you sure?
Of tomatoes or
Of red hab.
of what, sorry?
Red habanero.
Oh, red habanero. Oh, really? Yeah. 45 litres, that's really good.
Got a huge plant, many like kilos of chilies on it. I
Yep.
think there can be a benefit to going larger sometimes.
Oh, sure, yeah, sure. As I said, I don't really grow habanero, so you must have had it in a really good spot. Habanero is one of those sort of...
Fertilising every second day, alternating with phostrogen and the tomato fertilizer.
Right, okay. That is what it eats.
Yeah.
Your soilless media, your soil media is a lifeblood of that plant. So if you're pushing food into it, you're going to get the results, absolutely, yeah. But that would be ideal for that then.
So how many plants can you plant in that bag?
Well, I'd only put one. Otherwise, if you're using this, you plant that one like... Oh, there's your crown fruit there, see that? So when you plant it, you take that crown fruit out, just like so. And again, with this pot here, I'd leave a bit down so you can actually fill that with water and let the water run through it. Now we do sell masks at the counter, but because I've been growing veggies and everything and soil, I've been exposed to soil for 50 years, I think I'm immune now. So we haven't had a case, touch wood, of these years in the nursery, so that's great. And that's how you do that one there, if you want to plant in a bucket. The good thing about a black bucket is that is a heat source for those roots as well. And that, because they, as I said, the more heat they have, the better. Now once that's done, don't forget to water them.
Should you not slightly loosen the root before you put it in?
No, you don't need to. Because they're growing in a soilless media, those roots are dying to get away anyway. The only reason why you do that is if you had something that was sitting there and it was so root bound, it would just be like a hard lump. Then you probably could just, if that was the case, say for argument's sake, you don't need to because those roots are going to get away nicely. That soil's nice and soft. But if it was really hard and knobbly, you just go like that. If you need to, but you don't need to do it with these because these are all really, really good. So then you just sort of loosen the weed like that to make it that easy. Back in the days when we used to grow in a soil-based media, that's what you would do. Like when I first started growing plants, we grew in, this is my father, not me, we grew in soil and cow shit. And that used to get really hard. So in that sort of situation, you would sort of loosen the roots up a wee bit. Okay. Sheep pellets, do you want to mention about sheep pellets, Nick? I don't use sheep pellets personally, but sheep pellets are apparently quite good as far as wool has a very, very, like a loops in it, which is very good for water retention. I know they would have some sort of nutritional value, but I'm not sure about.
High nitrogen, so really good for, and just a natural source of nitrogen really, which you're sort of pushing more potassium,
Yes.
stuff like that for the fruiting plants. Sorry. So high nitrogen, so not so much fruiting, but really good for leaf growth, and really economical to use if you put some in water and use it as liquid food. That's all you want.
What about chicken pellets? You know the chicken.
Chicken pellets, it needs to be really well rotted from what I understand, and there's actually, I know, a new product that we'll be having in December, which is actually a combination of chicken and sheep coming. Dynamic Lifter from Yates has a lot of chicken, and I hear massively positive things about Dynamic Lifter. It also has seaweed and lots of other natural components in it, so it's hugely popular for any crop and stuff like that. Good?
Yeah, good, thanks, Nicola, yeah. What we're talking about, pesticides.
Yeah, it probably is me. So sea salt, seaweed, is essentially a multivitamin for your plants. It's a tonic. It's not a food. It's an amazing tonic. It has all the trace elements, and so trace elements, those multivitamins that we need to really well absorb food, that's what your plant tonics do. So seaweed is great for cell structure. It's great for all of these trace elements that Julian had on another piece of paper. So when you have all your trace elements and your multivitamins at really good levels, all your nitrogen, your potash, that all gets absorbed really, really well. So I love it, and especially for putting in a bucket, putting your plant in it before you transplant it into your pot and soil, it stops transplant shock. So really, really good for that.
So when your plant comes under stress, basically, when your plant comes under stress through transplant or whatever that's when you use these sort of products, correct? This one and that one.
This one here.
That one there.
And because it essentially strengthens the cell structure, so it makes it more heat tolerant, it makes it slightly more cold tolerant. It's the same as if you have really good levels of nutrition in your body, you're just that much better at absorbing nutrients essentially.
Another common problem with tomatoes, which I should have mentioned, is blossom end rot. Blossom end rot is usually caused by a lack of calcium or maybe too much potash. But what happens often with blossom end rot, it's associated with the physiology of the plant. Like say if that wasn't watered at a crucial time when that fruit is setting, what happens is that plant is not taking up the calcium in the plant and up into the top, and that's often when your blossom end rot can happen. So with your tomatoes, with everything needs change of air all the time. Don't leave your plants so they're stinking hot. You need to ventilate probably in the morning, close up at night. Especially, it depends what the weather's doing with winds and stuff like that, because all these plants that don't like being in the wind. With your peppers, if you've got a problem with pests and disease, usually the first place you look is the growing tips. Your aphids, your whitefly will always start at the most tender parts of your plant. And we've got some new products here, which to take through. This one here, Beta Bug, as I said before, is exceptionally good. Just 1 day withholding period. There is a new product out here for caterpillar biocontrol. This one here will kill all caterpillars, apparently. What it does, it works on the skin or the gut of the caterpillar, and it stops it from being able to eat stuff, and it kills it horribly. There is a graziers too, which you can use as a deterrent if you don't want to kill caterpillars. It's animal friendly, stimulates and strengthens growth in the plants. It's been used for a long time. I was going to get Nicola to talk about some of these things, or she's our dry goods person. Other pests and diseases your plant might get should be looked after pretty much if you've got a good soil, if you've got a good regime of just keeping the pests and disease off, you know, your aphids, your thrip, your psyllid, that sort of thing, you should have a good result. If you don't have a good result, I want to know about it, because if you do have a bad result, there's something you're doing pretty simply wrong. Because now is the time to plant these crops. If you plant them now, just watch out for late frosts and you should be away laughing. Yeah.
What extra controls do we have to put in if we're growing in tunnel or greenhouses? Jim wants to know what extra controls we put in for growing in tunnel houses. In soil or in bags? Both.
In a tunnel house, you have to watch out that it get too hot, probably. As you come into the summer months, you need to ventilate in the morning. We also have, you probably have to watch out because you will get, you do need pollination on these sort of things. So if you don't have bees coming in to pollinate, or you haven't got the air movement to pollinate the plants, you could have a problem with sterilisation with your fruits not fruiting up unless you ventilate during the day. Your tunnel houses are great for early winter, early spring, but then you have to ventilate later on. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yes, the wind will self-pollinate, flies can self-pollinate, a lot of that sort of stuff. You have to sort of see if you're getting a crop out of it or not. I know that I did a talk at the Canterbury Horticultural Society the other night, and one of the people there said they tried one of these things. This is a poppadome, and they said it was absolutely fantastic for keeping the worst pests off their plants, but it also allowed other things, beneficial things to come in. So there's one of those above the till, isn't there, Nick? Yeah, so if you want to have a look at that, how much are they?
120.
Yeah. But don't use it for taking camping because you'll get wet underneath it, okay? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Just what you were saying about the chilies earlier, how the really hot ones need a lot of heat to grow.
Yes.
If it's not so hot, will they just not be as spicy, or are they just not going to grow well at all?
Well, we'll ask the student over here. This lady's asking if they're not as hot as they can be, will they not grow as well? Certainly if you grow them on the south side of your house in a sunny spot, or they get hit with cold winds all the time, it will certainly have an effect on them. But how did you grow yours, sir? Do you have yours outside or in a greenhouse?
So I started, I bought seedlings, I kept them inside till they were about yay big, in a full sun window. Then I went outside into the big 45-litre pots.
At what time? What time do they go into bigger pots outside?
November, October, November.
Oh, so later on, yes. Yeah.
And then they basically, I did a little bit of pruning back with some stray branches, fertilised, first it was once a week, then twice a week, then every second day. They had full sun all day. Aphids were a major problem. I had to try and hit them every third or fourth day with the hose and pesticide. But I ended up getting a couple of kilos off of them. They were very hot.
Yeah. I think it's like the gentleman was saying, that is that if you start early and you get a good window into it, into growing them, like if you plant now, you should have a good result. But if you've got a conservatory or a kitchen window, if it's cold, to give them a good start, and then you plant them outside around about end of October, November, they should do a lot better. But early, because our window of opportunity is so small in Christchurch, because we can have such cold winds in the spring, and so you need to get started as early as possible.
Once they were sun hardened, it was full sun all day.
Yeah. The other thing you can do is put like a plastic bag over them to protect from the wind if you need to. Put some stakes on the outside of the plastic bag just to stop the wind from hitting them if you haven't got a place inside or they're outside all the time. It's important just to keep them grow. Sun. Sorry, a second. Did you ask a question?
Yeah. Would you recommend mulching, particularly in a hothouse, to reduce moisture loss?
If you're growing in soil, no. If you're growing in the soilless media, yes. Because your soilless medias have got much more drainage, so you're going to lose water a lot faster in this sort of mix. But the good thing about a virgin potting mix is you do not get the pests and diseases and that you could have in your soil in your greenhouse. That's the reason why I always plant this sort of mix, so you're not growing in a soil-based media that might have Pythium or Phytophthora or Fusarium, some of those bad waterborne funguses in it. Sorry, somebody asked me a question. Oh.
Sorry. You name 2
Steak chilies? I haven't. Did you stake yours or not?
Yeah.
You did? If they're growing quite big, yes.
During a windstorm, I lost about 40% of the branches, so then I staked the rest.
Okay, so the answer is yes. I think you have to look at it. If they get big, and they'll give you the signs that they'll start, they'll say, hey, I need some steak. And if that's the case, that's the case to use a steak. Probably not one like that. Hopefully they're about that big. You probably use someone like that. And then just stake it to it. Actually, while we're talking about steaks, a lot of people have problems with cucurbits. The main reason why people lose cucurbits, such as your cucumbers, your marrows, and so on, is because in the wind, they flop around to the stem break. So I always tell everybody to use a wee split cane, or bamboo stick like this, and put a tie around your cucumber, or your marrow. And that way they'll grow, and then they'll strengthen up, then they won't need that anymore. But that's the main reason why people lose it, because one is the wind temperature kills them, and secondly, the wind makes them snap. Yes, you do. You will do from around about December. If you plant now, from December they'll start to show signs of starvation. The lady was saying that if you have to plant these in shrub and tub, the food in the shrub and tub bag will last until about mid-December. Then by that time the roots will be right down the bottom. It'll be hungry for food, and that's when you have to start supplementary feeding it. Look to the signs of the bottom leaves going yellow, and that's your sign to feed.
One question with the tomatoes, you said take some leaves off to let the light in. Is it the same with the chili? Would that help?
No, I'll just leave those. Yep. Yes, sir.
Can I ask about aphids, please? So ideally, you just had a mental breakdown last year because aphids seem to come back like every couple of days.
Yes.
Every week.
Yes.
And no matter what pesticides I tried, it just didn't seem to do anything.
The gentleman was asking about aphids. Aphids are all female. Did you know that? It's not that time of year. And there's 4 generations of Sorry? And what happens, they have 4 generations of females inside them, and they go like Russian dolls. They just spoon them out all the time. So what happens is you can't put a permanent block over these like an oil or whatever, because they're growing. The tips are growing so fast that it's all new growth all the time. So all you can do is use this and just go. And the next day, and the next day. Okay. Don't forget that stuff. That beta bug is a 1 day withholding period too, so it's actually good. Don't forget your aphids, your white flake vectors. They can carry viruses. They can carry other diseases as well. So you've got to keep your plants as clean as you possibly can.
Sorry, what did you say about orange tomatoes and red tomatoes early on?
Oh.
How red need orange
Yeah, what I was saying is that your orange tomatoes have lipocene, and they all got lipocene in them, but your orange tomatoes, basically, you can use those raw, and your body absorbs that antioxidant, whereas with the red tomatoes, they have to be cooked before your body can absorb them, pretty much, yeah. Any last questions? Stuart?
This is lead in the soil.
This is what, sorry?
Lead.
Lead?
Yeah. Old houses take, the plants will take that. That's the question. Will they take
I don't think they do. There shouldn't be too much lead in your soils. Oh, that's an unusual question. Stuart here was asking about if there's lead in your soils that you're growing your plants in, will the plants absorb it and come out in your body later on? That's what you're saying, isn't it? Yeah. I don't think so, but I'm not 100% sure.
The old houses have paint.
I'm not sure it would be enough to worry about, because once upon a time, don't forget, a lot of pipes in the breweries or lead pipes and so on. I think you have to use a lot of it before it would affect you if that does come up in the plant. I don't think it'd be. I think it'd be negligible the amount that you would receive from that, but a bit of research would have to be done on that. I'm not sure.
And add lime. Is that to lower the pH?
No, your lime actually raises your pH. It makes it more alkaline. Yeah. So. No. Oh yeah. Well. You see. Oops. Sorry. Where are we with that? Oh, that's right. Oh, thanks. 7 is neutral. They do like a bit of acidity, but they want it. It's slightly acidic, but if you're getting a peat-based product or a lot of these bark products in your soilless media, they're way down here in the pH range. So we put lime in at the time of these soils here to bring our pH into this favourable range of 6.2 to 6.8. But again, 7 is neutral, and most soils, most plants love it within this range. Yeah. Does that answer your question about pH? Yes. Go. Yes, sir.
We've got a worm farm, and the juice that comes out of the worm farm, we use that on tomatoes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, what would you go your dilution rate? 10 to 1?
Off the top of my head, I think it is 10 to 1. So we're going to send Julian out into the tomatoes, so you guys can actually spend some time with the tomatoes out there and with him, and peppers and capsicums as well. Was there any follow-up questions before you get out?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So this is new this year. It comes in 3 flavours. It's all the same ingredient at different rates, and it's a deterrent only that was discovered by a Canadian food growing place. That it's basically a food, and the side effect is it deters cabbage and whiteflies at this rate. There's a rabbit, possum, and bird one, and also a slugs and snails one. So obviously, if you have any caterpillar problems with your tomatoes, which if you discover holes in your tomatoes probably means you do have caterpillar problem, this sprayed once every 6 weeks, and obviously new growth excluded, will keep off the caterpillars and the whitefly. Essentially, they don't like the taste of it, so it kills nothing. It's completely natural. It's a food. The side effect is it'll keep all caterpillars and whiteflies away. So I thought it was a really good one to have for today. You can use this on anything. It's 100% natural. And there's a concentrate as well. There's no withholding time. I think it might say. I think you are right. I think there is no withholding time, but we generally say 24 hours because you want it to dry and to its thing. So it's available on the concentrate as well. We're actually really excited about this because no one wants to spray their edibles with a chemical, so if we can deter anything, then that's really cool as well.
Well, Nick's here on the dry goods side of things. Is there anything?
No, so I'll be inside
okay,
with
right, good.
Table